Welcome back to Series 3 of the Huxley Morton podcast, the show where each week we speak to pharma company owners and industry leaders sharing their stories of personal and professional growth. In this series, we've got loads of exciting guests coming up for you, a brand new co-host for various episodes, and a quick fire round to really mix things up. I'm definitely excited to get going with it all, but before we do, I'd love it if you could subscribe and hit that notification button so that you're not missing out on any of the episodes that we upload. For now, thanks again for tuning in, and sit back and enjoy the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Huxley Morton podcast, the show where each week we speak to pharma company owners and industry leaders who have each given up some of their time to discuss their personal and professional journeys. This week, I am joined by Ian White, who is the founder and chief scientific officer at Neobiosis. Ian, I think I first came across yourself via LinkedIn. I had noticed that you were perhaps a fellow countryman of my own, having been to university in Liverpool. So look, I've given you a very quick introduction there, but give us a quick snapshot of who you are and Neobiosis.
Okay, well, first, thanks for the opportunity to talk with you guys. I'm looking forward to a conversation about science, life, and everything, I guess. We'll see where it goes. So I've been in the States now for over 20 years. I was born in Oxford, England, grew up in the RAF. My dad was in the RAF, and we traveled around quite a lot to different bases. I was subjected to the American way of life, living on a British American base when I was very young, and really sort of fell in love with the smells and tastes and looks of things that were American. You know, I remember as a kid looking at quarters and thinking they were so incredibly interesting looking. And in fact, we used to switch them out with 10p's at the arcade, because you would be able to get a cheaper run on the arcade for a quarter instead of 10p at the time. But I remember, you know, the grape flavored chewing gum and all those things. And so I think from a very early age, I was very interested in coming over to the United States. And after my schooling in the south of England, I went up to Liverpool University, Liverpool John Moores initially for my undergrad, and then Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine for my master's degree in parasitology. And from there, I was invited to the United States originally for 1 year. I was planning to come over for 1 year as a research assistant. That turned into an additional 2 years when I got offered a fellowship at Harvard. And then I decided that this is where I wanted to do my PhD. And so I applied to Cornell University based on the environment, really, the location. It was a beautiful place to study. And I was accepted as an international student, and sort of the rest is history. I spent 20 years in academia, and then recently I sort of made the jump into biotech.
Wow. An incredible story there. And I have to say, it's not so often that you come across a doctor and chief scientific officer with a background in scamming between 10p's and quarters. But hey, there we go. Some of the things that we unravel on the podcast are always interesting. So look, I guess that's a quick overview of yourself. Neobiosis, I noticed that you guys only started October 2020. Yeah. So what is the company all about? Where did the name come from? What does the company do?
Yeah. So when I was a postdoc, it was very hard. Living in Miami is very expensive. You don't get paid very much as a postdoc. So with 2 kids, it became very challenging just to pay the bills. And I had gone to a meeting, the World Stem Cell Summit, which is actually live today. It's virtual this year, but it's actually live right now. And at that meeting, I met lots of different people in biotech who were having a lot of success translating the sort of research that I was doing. And so I thought to myself, well, you know, I'm pretty well trained. I have a pretty good idea how to do this stuff. Maybe there's an opportunity for me to transition. And so I made some products that others make and sell in the industry of regenerative medicine. I sent them to third-party laboratories for testing, and they came back incredibly potent, and much more so than some of the companies that were doing $1 million a month in revenue. And so at that point, I decided to jump ship, and I initially didn't have anywhere to go. So I advised several companies how to get started and help them build their laboratories up and their manufacturing facilities. Wasn't very happy with the direction they were taking things. So my business partner and I started Neobiosis, talking about Neobiosis in March last year, right as COVID kicked off.
Yeah.
And so that became very challenging because then we couldn't meet up, we couldn't go visit labs, we couldn't recruit investors. So we basically had to do everything under the lockdown, and it took us a while, but we officially launched the company in July last year. So we're about to have our first year anniversary, and we went operational in October. So we've only actually been operational for a few months, but we became revenue positive within the first 3 months, and now we're in very good shape. We're hiring, and we've just brought on a new chief medical officer, who is Pascal Goldschmidt, who's the Dean Emeritus of the University of Miami Medical School. So we're in really great shape as far as our research and development goes. As far as what we do here, we perform the research behind regenerative medicine. So regenerative medicine is a relatively new field in space. And there's a lot of confusion in this area because so few people are actually trained in regenerative medicine. And so I leverage my 20 years studying stem cells, studying regenerative medicine with Dr. Goldschmidt and the rest of our team. And we study the mechanisms behind regenerative medicine, and we manufacture products from perinatal tissues. So the tissues that are usually thrown away after birth, like the cord blood, placenta, amniotic fluid. And we derive products from those that can be used in clinical trials. And in fact, we're about to submit our first IND, which is an investigational new drug application with the FDA for a clinical trial to treat post-COVID syndrome with one of these products.
Wow. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind for you guys over the last, I guess, 18 months or certainly since October last year. So it's regenerative medicine. You guys are now going and trying to get into the first stages of your clinical trials. How did this come about? So that's what the company is now focused. And look, this is where I always like to kind of start off the show is, if you were to go back in time, that you mentioned about your upbringing with your dad in the RAF, traveling, heading over to the States. Was this something that was always an interest to yourself? Because I now see a lot of it publicized through LinkedIn and just various blogs that I read online, and the regenerative medicine side of things is often linked to sports people. So it catches my eye, and I think that was one of your posts that grabbed me in. Anything that's sports related, I'm like, what's going on here? Did you always want to go down this route? How did you first even get into the world of science and potentially clinical trials?
Yeah, well, the answer to that isn't quite straightforward. It's a little bit convoluted because, of course, I was at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine because I was fascinated by how parasites interact with the human body and specifically the immune system. And so I thought my career trajectory would be down that road, studying how we're able to treat parasitic infections and how to understand the relationship, how parasites communicate with the body. These sort of things I found very, very interesting. And in fact, as a sort of side note, one of the reasons I got into parasitology at the beginning was because I read some books by the author Robert Desowitz. And he wrote books like Malaria Capers and Who Gave Pinta to the Santa Maria. And they're scientific novels. So they're very, very entertaining, but very, very scientific. And those really inspired me down the route of parasitology. And just as luck would have it, years later, after coming to the United States because of parasitology and pursuing that, I ended up taking some writing classes because I'm really interested in movie making and screenwriting. And my screenwriting teacher was Robert Desowitz's daughter. So very strange coincidence. That was a side note, but I thought that was a very interesting trajectory of sort of how I got here and everything. But so I always thought parasitology was the way forward. I came to the United States to work at Dartmouth College to study C. elegans, which is a model for studying parasitic nematodes. And then, of course, the idea was once I had the knowledge of parasites, I was going to marry that with the knowledge of immunology and I got offered a fellowship at Harvard for 2 years to study immunology and hematopoietic stem cells. And that was a great opportunity. You know, I used that opportunity as best I could. I worked long hours. I was at least 18 hours a day in the lab, you know, sleeping on the couch in the kitchen, taking showers in the animal facility so I could just make the most of the experience. And I really developed a love then for the hematopoietic system, where the blood comes from, the immune system. And of course, when you start to study that, you have to come back to the origins, which are stem cells. And so I really developed then a passion for stem cells. I did a PhD at Cornell University at the Ansary Stem Cell Institute within the Division of Regenerative Medicine. And, you know, things just sort of kept evolving from there, studying stem cells and then studying how stem cells were differentiated to become regenerative cells and contribute to tissue regeneration. And I realized that this was where I really had a passion. And that's when I pursued this area as a postdoc, 2 different postdocs, one at the University of Georgia and the second at the University of Miami. But things got very tough for me. You know, as a postdoc, it was very hard to get promoted to faculty because you're caught in a catch-22. If you don't have a grant, you can't get a faculty position, and without a faculty position, you can't get a grant. So I was sort of stuck, and I considered all kinds of things. You know, at that time I was thinking maybe screenwriting. I even thought about construction because there's so much construction in Miami. Maybe I'll just go into construction because maybe science wasn't the career for me because I just couldn't progress. And then suddenly the field of regenerative medicine really sort of exploded. And then I realized that I was incredibly qualified. I have spent 20 years studying these mechanisms in regenerative medicine, and most people that commercialize these sorts of products in this industry aren't particularly trained in this area. And so there was a niche suddenly. And so I jumped into the niche, and thankfully, I've been very successful since.
Wow. That is, I guess, a long road that you've followed there, Ian. And yeah, clearly, if you were almost sleeping in the lab, sleeping in the office, there, the passion has to have been there.
Critical.
And I know
the only way you can get through is to be passionate about it.
And I hear this a lot from people that come on the show, and just in general. I think Adam does too. I know that he also listens to a lot of podcasts and things, and hearing people talking about passion. Where was it that yours perhaps come from? Obviously, there was, you know, the line of studies that you were following, but there must be something perhaps. What I guess personality traits, characteristics allowed you to actually do that, because there's tons of people that are passionate about stuff. Often it can get confused with being hot-headed or other, I guess, characteristics. But you managed to clearly channel that in the right way. So what do you think it is about you, Ian, that allowed you to almost go through those tough times, knowing that it really was genuine passion, that?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I knew at the time that the tough times were going to get any better. They seemed pretty dark for a lot of the time because I was working very hard and I didn't seem to be getting anywhere. You know, even as a postdoc, it would be very hard for me to communicate my science to my peers and my mentors because they just didn't seem to get it. Thankfully, later on, that research ended up winning awards and getting published, and you know that's sort of been the springboard to my career. But I think that when I was younger, moving around in the Air Force may have helped, because every year or two after making friends, you're then torn apart from your friends and you're put into a new position and you have to adapt. You have to learn to be friendly. You have to learn to be approachable. You have to learn to work hard and start over. And so I think maybe, you know, that sort of helped at the very beginning. You know, as I got older, it was very hard to make friends because I'm so used to having friends for a year or 2 years and then moving on. And so as I got older, it was, you know, pretty lonely, I guess. So I was able to throw myself into work quite a lot. And then as friends did come along, I really cherished that. And I really worked hard at those friendships and made them work. So I think maybe, you know, as things evolved that way, I just was in a position where I needed that kind of connection with friends. I worked really hard once they were available, and that ability to interact with people has been invaluable when it comes to running a business, because You have to be relatively likable. I think I'm relatively likable. You have to give people attention. You have to you have to do fun things together. It's very important. You can't just do business and bark orders. There has to be a level of fun, because we're only here once. We're working hard, but we've got to have a good time doing it. So I think all of that together perhaps has really contributed to the success.
It's really interesting the way you describe that, Ian. It sounds like you have resilience deep in your bones, but also more importantly, there's this entrepreneurial spirit that drives through you, which is quite unique in the science field and in medicine generally, I find. I mean, I work alongside many similarly qualified people as yourself, and yet they don't have that inner drive and entrepreneurial spirit. They accept the things that you weren't willing to accept, by the sounds of it. The status quo within academia particularly, and the confines within which you've had to not just achieve but overcome within those particular boundaries that other people set for you, and not accepting that, and furthermore taking that forward and reinventing not just your skill set, but more importantly your value to the industry beyond which academia can support.
Yeah, I think I just try to make the world, it sounds a little arrogant or maybe a little cliche, but I try to make the world a little bit of a better place. Even when I was younger, I wouldn't accept the status quo. I wrote to George Lucas when I was a kid, asking if I could, come and work for him. He never wrote back. But, I would make models for masks, and, I really was interested in special effects. I would write treasure maps, and I would put them in bottles and bury them in the ground in the hopes that maybe somebody would find them and think it was something exciting to do. And in fact, there's a thing here called geocaching in the United States. I'm not sure if it's over there or not, but I would devise treasure hunts for people online.
The geocache side of things, just for our audience, what does that involve?
So geocaching is an online platform where people will just hide things randomly, and then on the website describe either the coordinates or a location, and then people just go and find them. It's like little treasure hunts.
Modern day treasure hunt.
Yeah, so it could be anything like a little matchbox with a little note in it, hidden under a lamppost or something like that. Or it could be as complicated as mine. And I had multi-steps where they had to actually figure out puzzles and travel through town, seeing historical sites and putting together the clues in order to get to the end. And there was a book in a library that I'd put there with notes in it that people could sign and everything. So I went all out, and it got very popular on the geocaching website. It's called National Treasure, after the movies.
The way you're describing that, so not only am I hearing scientist and medic, I'm hearing entrepreneur and also a very highly creative mind. You have a very creative mind, don't you?
Yeah, well, I wrote, after taking screenwriting writing classes, I wrote a full feature-length sci-fi movie, and I submitted it to a bunch of studios and what do you call it? The movie festivals, the film festivals. And I didn't win any, but I did place in several of them in Hollywood and other places with the script. So that was really exciting. But I am pretty creative. During my PhD, instead of going out drinking every night, which I did my fair share of drinking during my PhD, but I would use the computers in the lab to invent. So I'm an inventor as well, and I invented a fly fishing device. I found a prototyper. I made prototypes. I had to source a material in China. I found a manufacturer in China. I found a way to import it. And I started selling it in the United States at Orvis, Cabela's, LL Bean, all these places, and it won an award in Field and Stream. Actually, it's a little device for storing waste fishing line.
Wow,
you're being extremely candid around the broad skills that you have, but it seems like we're getting to the root of it, James, doesn't it? There is far more to Ian than meets the eye, and far more strands that connect the dots in this great brain of yours, Ian.
Well, really, it was it's just a case of learning, right? So when I started that company, I had no idea how to render art. I had no idea how to film a video or edit. I had to learn editing software. I had no idea how to communicate with China. I had to learn all these things, and so I just ground it out. And it was so entertaining to see the final product, the finished product. I started a company called Grasshopper Outdoor Products for my inventions. I just sold it recently. I think it's still out there right now. I sold it to a European company. But you're not born with these skills. You have to learn them, and so you just either are interested in accumulating those skills or you're not. And I was just lucky enough that I found those things interesting, and that's what kept motivating me.
I hear this a lot. Learners like to learn, and the more you acquire knowledge and the more you challenge yourself, the greater your ability to open up doors that weren't previously open to you. And by the sounds of it, what you described is you had a curious mind and you followed your interests, your passions, wherever that might have taken you. It sounds like you're open to risk, and we've touched on the creative side of it as well. But you're an open mind. It's clearly you're very open-minded. You're not
have to be
constricted.
You have to be just to enjoy being alive. You sitting at home watching TV isn't healthy for anybody. When I graduated from university, the first thing I did was I hiked from John O'Groats to Glasgow. With two friends. We just put backpacks on. We got a train up to John O'Groats and we started walking. It took 3 weeks with all our food and everything we needed. The first day we got so far we could still see the starting point. we did, and then, by the end we were doing 30 miles a day. So you just got to learn how to do it. You learn where to sleep, how to walk, but you just got to do it. If you don't do it, you never learn. So it's just a case of jumping in and doing it. That's really the lesson I learned.
So I've been to John O'Groats. I know how far north it is, and I've got some friends who live north of Inverness. I didn't realise until I went and visited them that it was 4 hours to Edinburgh from Inverness by car down a single lane. So I know it's a heck of a long way, and I've also followed that north coast route up to John O'Groats. So I know how wild that is as well. So fair play and kudos to you for having done that on foot.
Yeah, it was definitely a learning experience.
Yeah,
I bet, and I think a lot of what you've described there, I love the sound of it in terms of the storytelling when you were sort of going through, and it ended up in a library with the book there. And you mentioned National Treasure. That's the film with Nicolas Cage, I believe. As you were telling that, I was thinking of that thing, and they've got like the pendants that they.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I got a gold doubloon and I drilled holes in it. I actually got a guy to do it for me, and then I scuffed it all up to make it look old. And then you would hold that over a $2 bill to see the letters that would then sort of lead to the next code and everything like that. So I put a lot of work into it. And if you go to the website, there's still feedback from people that are just like, "What? How did you do this?"
Wow, that is.
I love reading that feedback.
Incredible. And along the way, it sounds as though I've just read a book called "The Obstacle Is the Way," and I think that you almost epitomize what that book is about. That any obstacles that have come your way, you've not necessarily seen them and given up or said, no, this isn't for me. You've actually used whatever hardship or challenges have been put in front of you to mold the type of person you are, to allow you to build relationships and kind of almost move on and reinvent yourself several times over, and then put that into the business perspective as well, to now do what you're doing, even with the international operations that you mentioned, with China and the international conferences that you're involved with. So it's a fascinating story as to how you've got here, and a man of many talents, isn't he, Adam?
Oh, well, I'm absolutely blown away. I had absolutely no idea when I saw your profile first, Ian, that you were as not as diverse, but as broadly skilled. And I think also earlier you mentioned about having fortuitous, serendipitous type conversations or situations. I actually feel very strongly, and having listened and spoken to many people about this, we all create our own luck, and actually seeing those things as opportunities as opposed to closed doors, wondering what's behind that the closed door is really the inquisitive mind. It's an inquisitive mind that opens that. It's open to change, and where you see change, you see opportunity. It's clear. And I think we're very closely aligned around that.
One of my favorite quotes is, "Fortune favors the prepared mind." Yeah. So we do make our own luck, but you've got to be prepared to accept it and do something with it.
But also see it as a flag, an opportunity. So I know Matthew McConaughey's written a book recently called Green Lights. He talks about green lights. It's the same principle, isn't it? That's what we're talking about. It's seeing an opportunity and not seeing it as a red. It's a green. You don't know where that green light's going to go, but you want more and more of those green lights and more of those opportunities for opening doors, and see where those opportunities take you.
Yeah, I think that when I was younger, you sort of can't see the wood for the tree, sort of thing. There's so many doors. You either don't feel the confidence to open them, or you just don't recognize them for what they are.
Yeah.
And now that I'm older, I'm just pushing on walls to see if they're doors. You know,
I thought that was just
I'm
me, but actually you're absolutely right. And I don't know whether that comes with confidence or indeed just a little bit more life wisdom and life experience, that actually you just want to push against and lean into opportunities and see where they go.
yeah,
It's that kind of, it's the opportunity for change that where you grow, isn't it? And we
yeah,
come back to this point. It's leaning into those opportunities, seeing them not necessarily as a roadblock, but
yeah.
something
Yeah.
else.
I was invited to give a student seminar at Cornell just a few weeks ago on Zoom, and one of the things they asked me was what is the best advice I can give them, and the best advice I gave them was to network, because networking can be very intimidating, especially when you're a student, because to be honest, people don't really want to talk to students.
Yeah.
You're sort of, you kind of get in the way. There's so many of them, and it's very hard for professors and others to talk to students. And so I told them, find another way in. Don't just approach and say, "Hi, I'm student. What's up? Here's the same old spiel that you've heard before." Buy them a drink at the bar. Offer to take them for dinner, or do something different, like push in a different direction. But don't be afraid to do it, because people inherently are relatively social. They do like to talk about high level things and interesting topics. So blow them away with a conversation about something they're not expecting, and then get a seat at the table. You've just got to try, and you've just got to be confident enough to be rejected. And you're going to be rejected a million times before anything happens. But don't take the rejection as a failure. Take it as another opportunity to try a different way or try a different person. You mentioned serendipity. We almost called our company Serendipity, because there's so much serendipity involved in what we do. We always meet the right person at the right time. The right opportunity comes around. Everything just seems to fall into place when you open yourself up to the universe and just listen and let it happen.
And that's the point. That's absolutely the point that you've made there. I have experienced that firsthand. What you put out in whichever channels or platforms, or however you put it out, it will come back to you. And I firmly believe that. And I'm experiencing something similar to you're describing. I've also been doing some work with my my university alumni as well. And I've been mentoring a student there for the last 6 months. And we've had a very similar conversation. I've worked with him, and honestly, it could have been almost a similar conversation. And 2 weeks ago, I presented to the alumni as a result of that experience and the student mentorship program. And there were some key questions. How do I open those doors? How do I get myself differentiating from everyone? Because everyone's got top grades, everyone's got the masters. They've all done their research. We came up with this great idea around writing a white paper together. What's been the impact of COVID over the last year to medical technologies, to opening routes of opportunity? We would never be having this conversation today had it not been for some of the challenges that we've had in this last year. And people are far more open to those communication channels than they ever have been before.
Yep. I literally told them that also. That's a great piece of advice. I said, what are you doing this evening? Are you watching TV? What are you doing? Write a paper, write a review article, write something and publish it in your own words. There are open access journals right now where you can publish things that are a lot faster. I published a paper on COVID right as COVID hit, because I was researching COVID incredibly when it first hit. I was learning a lot about it, staying up nights, just studying. So I wrote a paper, first author, only author. And they can do that too. And that's the only way you can pull yourself apart from the masses, is to demonstrate that you have something to say.
What's your differentiator? What makes you different? What makes anyone pay attention to you as opposed to anyone else? And that's the thing, because there are many identikit students coming out of universities, graduates and postgraduates coming out of university. It's the sorts of things that you've described around, that scientific integrity and interest in what you're doing, the deep dive and the so what. It's always about the so what. It's not the what, it's the so what.
Yeah. So another piece of advice that I give them, and I give my my employees, and I constantly have to remind myself when I'm presenting, because I present a lot in this field, I try not to stick with the typical academic presentation, which is here's the introduction, here's all the data, and here's my conclusion. I try to sort of base it more on like a TED talk, where it's more of a narrative. I build up the excitement and I tell them something they haven't necessarily thought about before in a way they haven't really thought about it. And then they're engaged and they listen, and then I can communicate some of my novel ideas to them. And I find they listen better rather than just glazing over. It's really important to bring a personal spin on these kinds of presentations. Show what you can do, but show it in a way that people will engage with. It's very important to stand apart from everybody else in this very competitive field.
Definitely, and I think you're spot on there. The key word for me is engagement. We're a recruitment business. We speak to thousands of job seekers each year, and it's not necessarily the best on paper or technically qualified that are the ones that stand out to us. It's the ones who engage, communicate, and almost leverage their own network to an extent, or reach out and just be a little bit different, because essentially we're all the same. We like actually helping people, so long as it's obviously I'm not going to go writing people's resumes and things like this, but if someone needs a little bit of advice and they reach out, of course, look, as human beings, we're inclined to want to help. And it sounds as though you've embraced that with the talks you give, the advice that you give to people, and naturally that must be sort of spilling over into you guys as a business. So look, I guess to get back on track and give us an update of how things are going. Where's Neobiosis sitting at the moment? So you're kind of not quite a year in since official launch time. You mentioned that you were about to start to perhaps get into submission stage for trials. Give us a snapshot of what's going on, Ian.
Okay, well, we closed our seed raise, so we raised $1.2 million to get us started. With that money, we were able to establish a lab here. I'm at the Sid Martin Biotech Institute in Alachua right now, which is the #1 biotech incubator in the world currently, actually. So we're very lucky to have a space here. So I have my office here. We have our research and development lab here.
Nice.
And we also have a manufacturing facility in downtown Gainesville, also at the Innovate Hub, where we do our manufacturing. But we're about to finish a new lab right next door, which is exclusively going to be ours. It's our building. We're going to be opening that at the end of July for manufacturing. It's ISO 7 CGMP compliant clean room for helping others with clinical trials and helping us with our clinical trials as well. We need more space. But we're raising capital now for our clinical trials. So we're going to have to raise between $15 and $20 million in order to do our COVID clinical trial. So we're looking for partners that are interested in getting involved with that. But the FDA right now are undergoing some changes. They're putting out new guidelines. So we're having to focus heavily on compliance right now, making sure that we're doing everything by the book with the FDA. So we're looking for help with that. We're looking to hire new regulatory compliance experts and things like that. So we're a bit slow right now just because there's so much compliance and regulation that we have to adhere to. But the plan is to continue growing. We've grown very, very fast, very, very quickly, very surprisingly. We didn't expect to grow so fast, to be honest. And over the next year, we hope to open a new lab. We hope to have our clinical trial underway. We hope to have our applications in for other clinical trials, and we're going to continue raising money. So we hope to be a real leader in the space of regenerative medicine over the next few years.
Wow. Sounds like certainly exciting times for you guys ahead, and busy times. Probably there's going to be a little bit of stress put on yourself there, but having heard what you've gone through previously, it sounds like you probably handle that weight on your shoulders.
Well, the difference now is I have a family and 2 kids. Before, when I was on my own, I could spend 18 hours a day, working in the lab and sleeping there. And now, I need to try to balance this with being a dad as well.
So can I just follow on from that question? It sounds like you have very aggressive expansion plans. I'm assuming you have a team of good people around you, and you intend to build that good team around you by the sounds of it. What kind of skills are you looking for in the types of individuals you're looking to engage with?
So we need more scientists, ideally scientists that are like me. You know, I feel like I really genuinely work outside the box, think outside the box. I have a lot of passion. Passion is critical in this space and pretty much any space, I guess. So I'm looking for scientists with passion, with competence, and I'm really excited to be involved in a startup, because not everybody wants to be involved in a startup because it's an incredible amount of work. Off the bat, working for an established company, you just you can turn up, do your work, and go home. Can't really do that with a startup. But we're looking for those kinds of individuals. We're looking for investors that understand our vision and don't want to really impose their vision on us. We have a fiduciary responsibility to invest the money, and we're very careful with our money. But also, we want the freedom to do what we think is right in this space. And so, all the investors, we've turned down a lot of money because it hasn't been right for our trajectory. But we really are looking for partners, investment partners that understand what we're trying to achieve, that we're trying to do it different than convention. We're very unconventional when it comes to what we're doing. And we're looking for compliance help, people that, because we need to work with the FDA, we need to work with lawmakers. I met with the White House staff a few months ago, and they were very excited. This is before the transition, very excited about what we're doing in the regenerative medicine field. And so we need to continue working with lawmakers and the FDA so that we can together understand how the field of regenerative medicine is growing and what we can do as a company to really push it forward in a safe and effective way.
Yeah, I mean, the compliance piece, sorry, James, but the compliance piece is absolutely critical to any future approvals, and making sure that you have that direct line into the FDA is pivotal. And I've worked with a number of companies who have brought in that expertise on a consultancy basis because it's so hard to come by, and it's rare that you are likely to be required engaging with that type of individual for a long period of time. But certainly when you need it, it's critical, and it gets you to the next stage and over and beyond. But also, I think it builds an awful lot of credibility with FDA and other regulatory agencies around the world that we're talking to. So, I would see that as absolutely being critical to any future success, clinical trial related, and around that future plan.
Again, that's one of the reasons we were able to bring on Dr. Goldschmidt as our chief medical officer, because he has so much experience with clinical trials. Not only does it demonstrate that this is what we're trying to do, but also then we have now the tools and the resources and the expertise to pull it off. But I would really recommend, if anybody's listening to this that are unsure of a career trajectory, go into regulatory science, go understand how biological drugs are manufactured and how the FDA tries to understand how to regulate those, because there's a huge gap. There is such a huge market for that skill set, and it's very well paid. So if there are people that are unsure which direction to take their career, seriously consider that, because that job is never going away. There's only going to be an increased demand moving forward.
I think to reinforce that point, I would concur with you, but also some of the things I said back to the alumni was getting to data, biometrics, and anything to do with medical technology right now, because it's, as you say, it is absolutely at the sweet spot, isn't it? All of this is around that magic space.
Right now is the time.
Booming throughout the industry is absolutely booming. And I think one of the things that I picked up on there, Ian, is not something I hear overly often, is that you had to turn down some potential investors.
That wasn't easy.
Probably not what you thought you would ever be doing when you first started out, right?
Especially when we're worried about, paychecks, because, the last company that I helped build up, I left them in March because of, differences in how we wanted to do things. And that was right when COVID hit, and I thought it would be an easy transition into something else. And then COVID was here, and I spent 6 months without a paycheck, which is very, very hard. And then, we built up the company, and people wanted to put money in, but it wasn't the right fit for us. It was very tempting, my business partner and I, but it just wasn't right. And we had learned the hard way. We had been involved with others that we would have regretted staying with. And we didn't want to get into that situation again. So knowing where we wanted to go was critical in making the right choices with whom we partnered.
What was going through your mind? I guess, look, for me, we're self-funded as a business, but for anyone in clinical research, I guess the funding and financing is critical. You mentioned a moment ago that you've now got a family, kids, etc. That must have been just such a boggling moment in your brain. What was going on in terms of your thoughts? How did that moment make you feel? Is that the biggest challenge you've perhaps faced personally since starting the business?
Yeah. When I was younger, my decisions didn't really affect anybody else. So I could take risks. My risk assessment level hasn't really changed. So I'm still taking those risks. But now, I have more responsibility. And so doing what I've been doing put me in a situation where we were out of money. We blew through our savings. We live in a very expensive city. We have to pay for the kids to go to school. I bought my dream car when I started working because while I'm in academia, you don't make a lot of money. And, I'm 46 now, and, people, my peers had nice cars, nice houses. We didn't have a house. We didn't, so I bought it. When I had some money, I bought, my dream car, which is a really nice Jeep. I had to sell it for a third of what I paid for it, just a few months after buying it, because we just needed to pay the bills. And these are the things we had to do to put food on the table. And I just had to keep grinding it out. Every day I just worked. I didn't know what was going to work out. So I did everything. I just did everything. That's no other way to say it other than you just try everything and something works. That's really what you can do.
It's so impressive. And I think I'm just now going to go back to what Adam was and yourself were sort of touching on a moment ago, is that what you put out will come back. And all I'm, seeing from you and hearing from you is that you have consistently, had much more integrity than so many other people that, I come across when speaking to, both clients and job seekers. And all I can see for you guys is that it's going to work out. Anyone who can actually just say, look, actually, I don't need that, and have that humility to be like, ditch the cart, this is more important. It's just a massive credit to you, I think. And I think it will come back in spades.
Well,
James, it reminds... Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that's really what I'm experiencing, is that, the philosophy that I adopted a while ago now was just give it all away. Like just get yourself, your emotion, your time, your energy, your intellectual property. I'm not talking about patentable stuff, but I'm just talking about when I present, I just give all the information and let people do with it what they will. And then what I find is that all of that has been coming back to us, because people appreciate you being open and honest and giving, and then they want to reciprocate. When you hold on to everything, when you don't want to share information, as we did in academia. In academia, we were scared to share information because if our competitor took our data and got a grant or published a paper ahead of us, we call that being scooped. Then you're toast. But people aren't, scientists and people in our industry aren't used to having everything given away. And so I just sort of adopted that mentality of just anything I can do, I'm going to do it, and let's see where the chips fall. And 100% of the time, it seems that all of that energy is coming back magnified.
Amazing.
So, James, it really resonates with the story that we had very recently with Lee Fell from Caritas. The principles and the values of the individual. It's not the Richard Branson Virgin thing, but it's certainly your principles and values drive your business, drive the external face of the business, but also the principles will come back. And there are so many common threads that you describe that clearly are in your DNA in every aspect of your life, not just your work, but your personal and your professional and every aspect. And I hear some very common threads, and it resonates very strongly with me for exactly that reason, because I really do identify with exactly what you're describing, Ian, because it's very clear that, we can all portray one external view, but actually the true self is what will ultimately come back to find you. And it just really resonated. As I say, we've spoken to a number of people recently, and there are very common threads coming through in under the bonnet. These are the under the bonnet type questions where, it's what really does make the person tick. What is behind what is the passion behind that individual? And I think you've really described that so well today, Ian.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I kind of almost faced a similar journey in my own business. 6 months in, I was wondering where any paycheck was coming from, to be honest. And it was a scary time. At the time, I didn't have any kids. It was just my partner and I. But yeah, as I say, just a big credit to how you handled that. You've already touched on some of the plans for you guys moving forward. So there's sort of a new lab. Is it a new lab next door as of July?
Brand new lab. So we broke ground on it. Well, it was an existing building. We had to completely pull it out, rip it out, and renovate it. And that's in progress right now to make a new compliant lab that will be exclusively ours. So that's going to be online next month.
And you're planning on winning some studies, getting going with some trials. What will that mean to you to get that all going, Ian?
Well, when I think about it, I get kind of emotional because it's been such a long journey, not just the last 3 years after leaving academia, but everything leading up to it, because really this is just a culmination of everything I've done through my whole career and maybe my whole life, I guess. Because really all I want to do is put some good out into the world, and I want to help people. I have a picture on my wall over there. You probably can't see it, but there was a patient. There was a patient that received some of the products that we manufactured in a clinic, and we really turned her life around. She was in really bad shape, and the products helped her. And I have a birthday card from her kids written in crayon saying, Dr. White, thank you for saving our mummy. And I get emotional whenever I think about that, but that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that's why I hope that we can pursue the clinical trials to help more people, because the products that we're developing are born out of a passion for science, listening to nature, which is very important because nature is really there to help us. We don't have to reinvent anything. It's all right there for us. We just have to listen. And pulling all that together and changing people's lives, improving their lives, improving their quality of life is really more than I could ever ask for, beyond the success, beyond a paycheck. Knowing that there are people whose lives are improved because of what I'm doing is really the motivation.
Amazing. I think it's incredible. I can't believe some of the things that you've been happy to share with us here today, Ian. It truly is, I guess, incredible. I think you're one of the most open book people that I've had on the show, and just there's so many branches to you in terms of up to the screenwriting, it's been incredible hearing about your journey and what you've got sort of coming up. It looks like Adam has got a couple of
three words. I feel like I'm a fan, Ian, but you are amazing. Honestly, you are amazing. What you're doing is amazing every single day, but how you got to this place is amazing. It's an extraordinary story. It's an extraordinary description of a life's work, because that's what you're describing here. And if you're looking for anything for a screenplay, I would say it would probably be your life story, because it sounds great. My goodness me. And it's not even,
not even complete.
Maybe at chapter 2 or 3. I think there's a few more chapters to come.
Yeah.
But that's, when I'm listening, I'm just, the hairs are standing up on the back of my neck, actually.
Well, I'll tell you one other thing that just sort of came to mind that was a sort of motivating factor. I've never had a 401k. I've never had a retirement plan. I've purposely not fed money into a retirement plan to light a fire under my ass, because I felt that was sort of a security blanket and a safety net that I didn't need. I really wanted to sort of be up on the tightrope without a safety net, and I needed to succeed. And that was sort of just something that came to mind just then that I think is another motivating factor. I'm not saying that people should throw away their retirement plans. But
that is really a case of walking the walk, and not just saying how to do things, but actually doing it,
living it and doing it.
And I think you've proved that by turning down investors, not taking a 401k. There's so many elements of that. So look, I'm certainly excited to see how your journey goes. But before we close the show, I think Adam summed you up with three words, which is amazing.
You can quote me on that if you want, Ian. I'm absolutely fine to put that on your website, by the way.
Yeah, he won't charge you. He might. But look, 3 words sums you up very well. But look, for our audience, we've now got 5 questions, quick fire questions for you to get some of your insights. So look, I'm just wondering where these are going to go. I'm excited to hear these. Look, what is the number one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self, not just anyone, to you as in your younger years?
I think the advice I'd probably give myself is it's going to be okay, because I was really worried for a long time that it wasn't going to be okay. You know, I worked very, very hard and I didn't seem to be getting anywhere, and things did seem dark. You know, I went through some depressions, some very difficult times. And, you know, moving over to the States, I was by myself, you know, very lonely. It can be very lonely. And it's all okay now. You know, I've got a beautiful wife, fantastic kids, an incredible business partner, a wonderful team here, a really exciting company. I present on a regular basis to audiences that are interested and engaged in what I'm saying. And so it was all worth it. You know, you sort of have to
Like that.
go through the difficult times to really learn about yourself. And I did that, I think. And now I can say that it's okay.
Amazing. I guess, look, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but my next question is about the top 3 qualities that you value most when building a team.
Top 3 qualities. Well, integrity is important. That's critical. You've got to be trustworthy. You've got to have a very strong moral compass to work with me. I find that that's very lacking in a lot of people, unfortunately. But I've met some incredible people that is truthful. So integrity, passion is important. You've got to have passion, but by the bucket loads. And you know, I hear people often criticize homeless people for not trying hard enough, and you know, and giving up and everything. But you know, passion is something that you're kind of born with. It's an energy source that you can't necessarily control. And so I'm very fortunate in that regard, that I was born with passion and that I just couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop myself asking more questions, reading an encyclopedia from front to back, and studying and working hard and always questioning nature and everything. So passion is something I was lucky to have. And there are people who are not as fortunate. They don't have that passion, and I feel for them. And I hope there's something in the future I can do to help them. You know, there are people in jails right now who have made poor choices because they've not had any other options available to them. And so one of the things I want to do is reach out to people in jail who are in prisons, who are interested in biology, and try to give them a new spin on biology, try to make them excited and give them that passion that they maybe weren't born with. So passion is critical. I would say adaptability.
One more. I think those 2 are incredible and clearly match up with your own characteristics. Push you for one more on that.
Yeah, adaptability. You've got to be able to adapt to your environment. If you can't adapt to your environment and you can't create a new space for yourself, then you're toast. You've got to be able to be malleable. You may think that your career is going in one direction. You may be able to see a pipe up there on the you can see that pipe. So that pipe came from a book I read by Sinclair Lewis called Aerosmith that really inspired me to go into graduate school. And long story short, basically the character there had a lab, a bacteriology lab in the 50s, and they would sit in their lab and smoke. And you know, late at night and come up with these great ideas for experiments. And I always had that romantic idea that I would be a professor in my own lab, smoking a pipe and I worked at that for a very long time until I realized that maybe wasn't my trajectory. It got me to a certain point, but now I needed to be adaptable, and I had to change my trajectory slightly towards what I'm doing now. And so that pipe is up there as a reminder that I've succeeded in what I've set out to do, but it's just in a different way.
I like that. Reframing it.
Yeah.
Okay, my next quick fire question, and that is, what is the number 1 book or resource that you would perhaps recommend for our audience?
Well, I don't know about a particular book. I mean, it's really important to read. I haven't really read for fun for a long time, but it's very important to read books for fun because it really opens up your mind to a lot of new ideas that you might not have had. So there's not one particular book, but maybe a resource. Just yesterday, I was telling my team about TED Talks and how valuable TED Talks are, because they are not only a resource for information, but they really inspire you to think critically and think differently than everybody else. And so I think by watching TED Talks, you really change how you think. And I think that really helps in business, especially for scientists that are trying to transition because we're so rigid. TED Talks really help you sort of break that mold and become more, liquid in your thoughts. And
I agree. I do love a good TED Talk. I do. Get sucked in. I end up going from one to the other.
You can't stop once you start there. And I watched one on American Sign Language the other day, and I was scrolling through, and I just happened to click on it, not expecting to watch it, and I just couldn't take my eyes off. It was just fascinating, just this individual, how they communicated. And for us, communication is critical. It's important to be able to communicate our science and what we're doing. And these speakers during TED Talks communicate wonderfully, and it's such a source of education just to hear them present a narrative. I really recommend people spend some time on the TED Talk website.
Fantastic. And look, what is your number one favorite thing outside of work?
That's easy. Family, definitely family. Seeing my family back in England, going to the pubs. I really miss the pubs in England. A nice ale is something I really enjoy. Nice. My kids are a source of incredible joy. Without my kids, I don't know if I'd have the energy at this age to really keep going. But my family is my passion. But being creative, writing, screenwriting. I'd love to get into the movie making business if time allows and resources allow. That's a way that I would really like to spend some time.
There's always time, Ian. There's always time. You just don't know. Look, to close the show then, look, finally, what is your number one golden rule for life and in business?
Just be a good person, I think.
Simple.
Put good energy out into the universe. I mean, as a scientist, we're not supposed to be very spiritual or anything. This doesn't require necessarily being spiritual, but we are energetic beings. The whole universe is created out of energy. Cells are made out of atoms, and atoms are energy. And just create good energy, good vibes, whatever that means to you. Just be good to people. That's a good place to start, and you'll find that people are good to you.
Fantastic. Well, Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I certainly wasn't expecting us to go in all sorts of directions that we went.
I'm also grinning from ear to ear. I'm just grinning from ear to ear. I could listen to you all day, Ian, to be honest. And if ever you want to do a TED Talk, I don't know where you start, to be honest, because you've got that many different topics that you can cover.
20 minutes.
I know.
So
maybe you could have a whole series for yourself.
Well, we do have some podcasts out there. I've been interviewed recently on a few different podcasts where I talk about, hacking pregnancy and a few other things. So if you guys are interested to hear some sort of off-the-wall ideas as a tangent to what we've been talking about, there's some resources out there that I would recommend.
We'll definitely hook up the links onto when we put this out. We'll get the links on there. Make sure that there's a link to your profile on LinkedIn and the other videos that are on YouTube or online. We'll make sure that we get those hooked up for you. But look, Ian, once again, thank you very much for coming on the Huxley Morton podcast. Pleasure having you, and we'll let you get on with the rest of your day.
Well, it's my pleasure, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. I did enjoy this a lot. It was great meeting you both, and I hope at some point we can get a beer together next time I'm in England, perhaps.
Sounds amazing.
I absolutely guarantee that. You just give me the call and I'm there.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right.
It's been an absolute pleasure.